Okay, so in regards to Harambam's use of quote-unquote necessary beliefs, some scholars argue that a portion of his statements in the Mishnah Torah, the Igrot, 13 Principles of Faith, and More Nevuchim did not reflect his true opinions. A lot of scholars maintain that. Would you agree with that assertion? And what are the pitfalls of viewing Harambam from an academic lens?
Okay, so one of the great things about Harambam is that he's such a clear writer. I mean, I can look at, all the Rishonim, amazing minds, amazing Chachamim, amazing Bekiut. I mean, you look at the Rishonim, that tremendous knowledge of the Torah, incredible. But Harambam was special, not just because of his knowledge of the Torah, but because he had a way of expressing himself so clearly. He's probably one of the clearest writers ever, maybe in the history of our people. And he states that these Yod Gimel Ikarim, these 13 principles, are fundamental to Judaism, fundamental to the Torah, so much so that if you reject these principles, if you expressly reject, if you say, I don't believe in this, or you say, I don't believe in that, or whatever, I mean, you're right, like a really clear, right? He's like really making his position clearly. He's articulating it in a very unambiguous fashion. And I would say that no writer could have possibly expressed himself more clearly about a particular matter than Harambam did about the 13 principles. So if Harambam didn't really believe in them, let's get back to Galileo. We mentioned him before. Shall we then say that perhaps Galileo didn't believe in the Copernican view of the solar system? He probably had a secret agenda. Would that be taken seriously by any scholar? I mean, the guy was thrown into the Inquisition. He died, I think, in the dungeons of the Inquisition. Perhaps we should say that Newton really didn't believe in the law of gravity. Right? There was a secret agenda there, but he didn't really believe in it. He didn't believe in the mathematical formulations regarding the strength of gravity decreasing with the distance, right? Based upon the inverse square law. He didn't really believe that. I mean, he said it, but now a new scholar and new discoveries have been made about Newton. He didn't believe that. And perhaps Einstein didn't really believe in the general theory of relativity. And he saw no real contradiction with quantum mechanics. He actually accepted Niels Bohr's quantum mechanical view of the universe, that God does play dice with the universe, right? I mean, would anybody take this type of thinking seriously? Would anybody give a single penny to a scholar who says, I want to show that Einstein didn't believe in the general theory of relativity. I want to show that Galileo didn't believe in the Copernican view of the universe. Would anybody in any field take anything of this nature seriously? I want to say that it's not just that Harambam said things clearly and unambiguously. He was also very passionate. I mean, you can't ignore the passion that he expresses, right? I think it was Pablo Picasso who says that art washes away from the soul the dust of everyday life. He was passionate about art. If I had to put this in the case of Maimonides, I would say that, perhaps it would be that the Torah washes away from the neshama the dredges of the emunot tefillot surrounding us, right? And the purpose of the Torah is to cleanse our neshama. And at the foundation of that is the 13 ikarim, right? The expression of the 13th ikarim is the very foundation of the emunot of Am Yisrael, of which Harambam is so passionate about. So, I mean, can you say it? Yeah. Will there be people who fund this type of research? Sure. Is it credible? Can we take it seriously? Is it fair to Harambam when he's so clear about his beliefs and so clear about what lies at the foundation of Judaism? And he not only says it, he explains it and he articulates the connections between the Torah and the Pesukim and the Yesodot. And finally, he's so passionate about it, right? He's so passionate about it.
Why do you feel like with him specifically, you just feel like everybody has, they say like Maimonides, your Maimonides, everybody's got their Maimonides, right? So there's this for some reason with him, it's like everybody wants to read into what he's actually saying, as if to say like he's a true he writes in code and he has these messages. Obviously, we don't do that with everybody else. So what is it about him that makes people think that?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Hanambam was just he had such a clear, simple articulation of Torah and Mitzvot. It's such a simple articulation of Torah and Mitzvot that you really have two choices. You either join Torah and Mitzvot, or you pretend like he didn't say what he just said. I really think that the reaction to Hanambam is a psychological reaction. People can't handle the truth.
Yeah.
They can't handle the truth of Hanambam. They can't handle the truth of the Torah and Mitzvot. Yes, you should follow Torah and Mitzvot. We're not going to force you. That's exactly what's so scary. We're not going to force you. Right? We're not going to force you. You should do Torah and Mitzvot. And if you read Hanambam, you're like, yeah, this kind of makes sense. So what do you do with that? Well, what do you do with that? And then the only thing left open is to attack Hanambam. When he said E equals MC squared, he didn't mean E equals MC squared. When he spoke about the general theory of relativity, he didn't talk about the general theory of relativity. And when this scientist said this, he didn't mean that, he meant something else. Okay, right. It's more of a psychological reaction than an intellectual reaction.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. All right. So changing gears, your father's book, The Horizontal Society, really opened up our eyes to the dichotomy between what would be the horizontal society versus a vertical society. Can you explain to our audience the general scope of this work and how it relates back to our tradition?
Yeah. So, we live in the Western world, and the Western world has been pretty good. I mean, historically, it really has been a nice progress in mankind, especially in the case of the United States of America, with the founding fathers, setting forth in the Constitution certain biblical ideas of human rights. I don't like the word human rights, but I do like the biblical rights that people have. And there's been a certain progress. But there's no hope. There's no hope for the Western world. And the reason there's no hope for the Western world is ultimately the only thing to protect the rights of man is the idea that there is a berit between God and his nation. It's only within the context of the berit that the rights of man can be protected. Because here you're saying as follows. There's always going to be ruthless political leaders who want to deny rights from men for whatever reasons, right? Who take away those rights to help the people who brought them into power, to help themselves. And this has happened throughout history. It's not, I don't need to repeat what's happened over and over and over again in history. The idea of people being denied basic rights because the leader wants to take away those rights, use the people, abuse the people, and this happens. The only possibility to protect people against the Rex, against the tyrant, against oppression, against dictatorship, the only possibility is if a person like Avraham Avinu stands up to Nimrod and he says, Nimrod, you are not God. Nimrod says, I give the people rights and I take them away. I decide what rights they get. Avraham Avinu says, no. Man is created in the image of God. I'm using the standard translation. Man is created with certain God-given rights. That's the only possibility of standing up to ruthless dictators. Because what you're telling the dictator is, you're not the one who gave me the right. I don't need you to vindicate me. I'm created by God. God gave me what I have, and God gave me certain rights as a human being. That pulls the rug under the dictator. The main point of Avraham Avinu, and of course, the idea of there being one God was spectacular and it stands at the center of everything. But there was also a political point, and that is you, Nimrod, have no right to oppress the people. That's one of the great messages of the horizontal society. The message of the horizontal society is as follows. There are vertical societies. In vertical societies, there's the Rex on top, and it doesn't have to be, it can happen within the context of what they call democracies. I mean, many democracies today are just there to make people feel good and feel like they live in a democracy with few people understanding, well, what is democracy? What does that mean? How does it benefit me? It's democracy. Oh, good, that's great. By the way, I am, of course, in favor of democracy. I'm not in favor of people unambiguously accepting a government that says we're democratic and therefore we're good. Nevertheless, the idea of a vertical society is there's always going to be somebody on top and somebody a little lower and somebody a little lower, and the masses will be oppressed. They will be used by the people on top for whatever purpose, for whatever agenda, and there's always an agenda. The idea of a horizontal society says as follows. The relationship should be between man and the text. There is a text. The text was given by God. And in the text, I have certain rights, right? Lo ta'ashok, you're not allowed to oppress me, right? Lo tonu ish tamito, you're not allowed to overcharge me. All these rights, many rights, etc., etc., etc. Many rights. These rights can't be touched by anybody. The king can't take these rights away from me. That's a horizontal society. Because the king himself has authority by virtue of the same text that gives me my rights. The king has no authority outside the context of that text. And therefore he cannot oppress me because he himself is subject to that text. So the horizontal society is a society which has the starting point is God. God communicated to us through this text, and we're all under the text. Our rights come from this text, and therefore there is no possibility of a vertical society which is, no, you're going to be oppressed, and you're going to be under, and you're going to be under, and you're going to be under. So the Western world doesn't have hope because the Western world doesn't have that text. And you see
didn't the founding fathers kind of, forgive me for interrupting, but they kind of broke away from the British monarchy, and they broke away from the Catholic Church, which dominated the world, and they kind of wanted to establish a biblical kind of system where the Constitution, in a sense, is like like what the Torah is in a way, and everybody's rights are kind of bound by those laws. So, isn't that kind of what they tried to do? And if that's the case, why is it hopeless?
Yep. First of all, I agree with everything you said. That's exactly what they did. They took the Constitution and they said the Constitution will determine what the president's powers are. He can't act outside the Constitution. The Constitution will determine what the Supreme Court's powers are. This Constitution will determine what the legislative branch of Congress's powers are. Exactly. Nothing outside the context of the Constitution. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, gives certain rights to individual. There's certain freedoms. Exactly the way it was supposed to work. He took the Bible as they took the Bible as the model. It could have worked perfectly. That's why you need a berit. The reason you need a berit is you need a people who say, we are bound by the text. We are going to accept it. This is what we accept. We respect the text. We read the text. We study it in public. Every once a week on Shabbat, we read the Parashah, and Sheni v'Chamishi, we read the highlights of the Parashah, and we finish it from A to Z. We study the Constitution every day. We delve into the study of the Constitution. Of course, none of that happens in the United States. They don't have the berit, and that's the missing point. If they had the berit, people of the book, the book is entrusted to us by God because God trusts us to protect the book, right? And to live our lives according with the book, and not to tear up the book. What they're doing today in the United States, to a certain extent, is they're tearing up the book. And leave politics aside. It doesn't matter whether you're in favor of this policy, against that policy. That doesn't interest me. I'm a rabbi. It interests me personally, but I'm talking now as a rabbi, not as a politician. They're tearing up the Constitution. Clearly, that's happening as a matter of constitutional law. And there you see the Western world losing it. Is it a possibility that America will stand up and say, hold on, stop this. We want to return to the Constitution. We need the Constitution, otherwise things are going to turn into chaos. Maybe. I hope it happens. I live here, so I really do hope it happens. Will it happen? You know when it'll happen? When Am Yisrael makes teshuvah, and when we bring about Yemot HaMashiach, then there is a possibility for America and other countries to say, hey, look what they just did. We want to do the same thing. Let's return to our Constitution and return to a sense of freedom and normalcy.